Okay, so I'm not really sure how this happened, but when I was recording today's gameplay, something weird happened. When I was using the mic drop, enemies were like getting eliminated in a reasonable amount of time, and I found myself not dying as often, even when I took on an encampment. Now, I am aware Coconut saved me a lot here, but everything kind of ended up dying, and the mic drop actually sort of held its own. So you see, my point is, today I was going to record a video about the mic drop and kind of how comical it was, how many of you voted for me to actually cover this thing when I joked about it in my llama openings video. That was a while ago, but I never forgot about all of you people who commented there. So I always intended to loop back around on this weapon, but it was low on my priority list because, and this is my point, I thought this weapon would be really bad, but no, it was actually quite good. And it's one of the first sound weapons where its sixth perk actually was more of an asset than anything else, because you can see that it has the same options as the other Boombox weapons. Either eliminating, hitting, or stunning an enemy can trigger nearby enemies to start dancing. Which one of these is best is pretty much up to you. I think eliminating is a little bit more consistent. Maybe hitting an enemy 3 times isn't that bad either. Stunning or knocking back is going to happen pretty often anyway, so I don't think any of these 6 perks should make any difference in your opinion on which schematic you should power up. It really depends on your playstyle, but what I'm saying is, I found that with the enemies dancing like crazy and, not attacking me while they're dancing, it actually made this a really usable and viable weapon. I can't believe I'm saying this. And the right click was not as impressive, but you can use the heavy attack. It'll send enemies flying and it'll hurt them in the process. And it actually was an all-around decent weapon. So the loadout I was using is probably expected. I always like to use Paleoluna. She buffs melees by a lot. A lot of people don't like that I use her because a lot of my damage is coming from Paleoluna, but I'm not going to show a weapon in a loadout that I wouldn't use in a game-to-game mission anyway. And as of recording, Paleoluna is actually in the shop right now, so lots of people have access to her, and frankly, I'm going to sound a little tough here, but frankly have no excuse to not be using Paleoluna because she's very, very good if you're going to be using melees. And of course, I did put a little bit of club damage in my support, and that's pretty much all this weapon needed. It was slaying otherwise. And with a wide sweeping arc and a crit build and an attack speed perk, which is not something you can always put on a melee, it was performing very, very well. So, if you're going to make your mic drop perform well, what kind of perks should you put on it? The copy that was given to me is spec'd like this: crit rating, crit damage, attack speed, dancing to enemies. If you guys want to use that, then see you guys later. Check you out in the next one. No, I'm just kidding. Please don't leave the video. I could explain why this works, but for my own copy, I don't actually have any of these leveled up because, as I said, I did not have a lot of faith in this weapon, and there are a couple of ways to go. So you only have 2 attack speed perks on this, and that's kind of okay. If you were going to spec all the way into Paleoluna, you were going to let her do all of the work. You could probably do double attack speed, and that predominantly is always the best way to go for Paleoluna. That's just kind of a running theme, like damage here, double attack speed, and then probably just another damage, or damage to dancing enemies. As I mentioned, those will be very common, as a lot of enemies will be dancing while you're attacking them. Of course, that does not apply to mist monsters or bosses, so that is very, very important, because your biggest targets, the guys that are going to give you the most trouble, are the mist monsters and the bosses. So you are going to have a dead perk in those situations, and that's where a damage perk or even a damage to mist bosses might be a little bit more generalized and better all around. But if you're not just specking all the way into Paleoluna and you want the mic drop to work with any build, like I showed earlier, an attack speed, crit rating, crit damage is probably the way to go. I don't know where the other crit damage perk is here. I think there's only one on here, which is important because if you're going to use Totally Rockin' Out, there it is. It's hiding down here. You're going to want the 2 crit damage perks. That's what I was looking for. So if you're going to be using Totally Rockin' Out with a melee, which is always kind of recommended, is something you might want to try out, a single attack speed, double crit damage, and you could even fit in a crit rating perk, which isn't totally necessary. You do get a little bit of diminishing returns if you're using Totally Rockin' Out because adds so much crit rating. Honestly, a damage perk instead of a crit rating might be a little bit better. And what I mean by diminishing returns is you can put crit rating on your mic drop here, but if you have a second crit rating, it won't add nearly as much crit chance to your weapon. So my point is, 1 crit rating is all you're going to get away with, because that second crit rating would be less overall damage bonus than a damage perk or a second attack speed perk or a crit damage perk. Every other option is going to result in more damage. So if this is hard to visualize because my schematic is kind of unfiltered here, I'm apologizing, but damage to dancing enemies is essentially a variable, but this is how I simplify it. 2 attack speed perks if you're using Paleo Luna, and then a damage perk up here, and then either damage to dancing enemies or damage to mist monsters depending on your playstyle. Those 3 are kind of variables. If you're using Totally Rockin' Out, then crit damage, and then you want the crit damage up there. Double crit damage, maximizing that is definitely important with Totally Rockin' Out. I wouldn't recommend using this weapon without at least 1 attack speed perk, and then of course down here you probably want to go damage, as I sort of explained. And then this is sort of for the all-around general build. You're going to want an attack speed perk always, that's a minimum. You're going to want a crit damage up here, crit rating down here, and then down here you have an option. As I showed, the copy that was given to me has the damage to dancing enemies, which does come in handy in those large crowds of enemies, but I think a crit rating, double crit damage, attack speed build would probably be the best way to go, and that's kind of interesting to say because most melees have a pretty high crit chance, but with a base 10% crit chance on this thing, you're not going to be critting a ton, but I found that it doesn't really matter. You're hitting multiple enemies with one swing in a lot of cases, and a lot of end up dancing, so you have a lot of extra time to get those extra hits off, and especially when you're going up against the bigger enemies, you are definitely going to enjoy critting because you are going to require it to take down an enemy. Because you can think of it like this. Say you're going to go up against a smasher, and you're going to be hitting it a lot because it's going to take a lot of hits to kill that smasher. In those situations, the amount of times you're going to hit him, say it's like 10 or 15 times, by that time you would have almost certainly crit at least 5 times, so it kind of averages out in the long run. Whereas against the normal enemies and the husky husks, where you might not get lucky with your crits, they're going to die in a few hits regardless. So my point is, I don't really see a reason not to go crit on this, as you're always going to have time to get those extra swings off. And then of course for the element, it sort of depends on what zone you're in. I would recommend energy as an all-around recommendation. As of recording, there's an abnormal amount of fire missions around, so water could be a safe bet. But if you're watching this in the future, maybe there are nature missions everywhere, so you might want to spec it for fire. Or if there are a bunch of water enemies all around, you might want to spec it for nature. I'll link my elements guide below if any of that confused you. That explains it a lot more clearly. But that just about wraps up my recommendations for the mic drop. I was really impressed with this weapon. It eliminated the enemies a lot quicker than I thought it would. Its right click, heavy attack was a lot more impressive than I thought it would be. I actually found myself enjoying this weapon, and it's rare that I say this with some of these off-color weapons, but I might end up actually using it myself just to have a little bit of fun on stream. Now, it is a bit of a tall order. I would have to max this thing out. I would have to spend a lot of perk up to do that, and there are a lot of other weapons that are calling my name right now, but the mic drop might be getting a visit from me in the future, but I won't be doing anything right now. If you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to click subscribe, like the video. If you guys want to use code Mista to check out, I'd really appreciate it. If you guys want to become a channel member, you can join with the join button on the channel or the link in the description below. You get lots of nice perks. You can see them here. I am streaming on Twitch more so nowadays, so I'll have my link down below. If you don't want to become a member on here because you want the emotes in the stream chat, you could definitely subscribe on Twitch if you guys want to support me in any way. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day. And then